The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door of my tiny Seattle apartment like a grenade with the pin half pulled. Elliot Harper, you are cordially invited to fulfill a contractual obligation. It read, the words cold and formal, yet they burned through me like wildfire. By nightfall, I was on a plane to San Francisco, chasing a past I thought I'd buried and a future I couldn't yet fathom. I was 27, a graphic designer scraping by on freelance gigs, when the call came from Alexander, Xander Vaughn's attorney. Xander, 29, tech mogul and heir to a real estate empire, needed a husband, not out of love, but necessity. His family's trust fund, worth billions, required him to be married by 30 to inherit. The catch? His ex, Julian Carter, 30, a charismatic photographer with a smile that could melt glaciers, had vanished 2 years prior, leaving Xander heartbroken and the contract unfulfilled. Enter me, Elliot, the replacement, the stand-in for a love I'd never touch. I signed the papers in a sterile office, promising 1 year of marriage for a payout that would erase my debts. It was a business deal, nothing more, or so I told myself. San Francisco glittered below as the plane descended, the Golden Gate Bridge a ribbon of red against the dusk. I'd met Xander once before, at a gallery opening where Julian's photos hung like ghosts. Xander's sharp blue eyes had locked onto mine, and for a fleeting moment, I'd felt seen. Now, standing in his sleek penthouse, I felt like an imposter. Elliot, he said, voice low, extending a hand. His dark hair was tousled, his tailored suit hugging a frame that spoke of late nights and relentless ambition. Thank you for doing this. His smile was polite, but his eyes were distant, still searching for Julian. The first weeks were a blur of staged photos, public appearances, and carefully crafted lies. We attended galas, my arm looped through his, smiling for cameras while my heart thudded with the weight of our charade. Xander was kind but guarded, his laughter never reaching his eyes. At night, in the sprawling guest room of his Nob Hill mansion, I'd sketch him from memory. His sharp jawline, the way his fingers lingered on a wine glass, the sadness he hid behind charm. I told myself it was just admiration, not attraction. I was here for the money, not his heart. But cracks formed. One evening, after a tense dinner with his investors, Xander found me on the balcony, sketching the city skyline. "You're good," he said, peering over my shoulder. His breath was warm, close. "Why do you hide it?" I shrugged, deflecting. "Not much to show." He sat beside me, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "You're wrong," he said softly. "There's a lot to you, Elliot." My chest tightened. For the first time, I wondered if he saw me, not Julian's shadow, but me. Weeks turned to months, and the lines blurred. We'd talk late into the night, sharing stories of our pasts. My small-town Ohio roots, his pressure cooker childhood in Manhattan. He laughed when I described my first disastrous attempt at surfing, and I caught glimpses of the man beneath the mogul, vulnerable, searching. One night, after too much wine, he kissed me. It was brief, hesitant, but it unraveled me. "I'm sorry," he whispered, pulling back. "I shouldn't have." I stopped him, my hand on his cheek. "Don't be." That kiss became our secret, a fragile thread pulling us closer. By month 6, I was in too deep. I loved him, fiercely, stupidly. But every touch, every whispered moment, was tainted by the contract. I was the replacement, temporary. Julian's absence loomed, a ghost in every room. Xander's phone still held photos of him, candid shots of a life I'd never live. I'd catch Xander staring at them, his face a mask of longing, and my heart would fracture. Then, one foggy morning, everything changed. I was in the kitchen brewing coffee when the doorbell rang. Xander answered, and I heard a voice, smooth, familiar, like a song you can't forget. I stepped into the hall and froze. There he was, Julian Carter, all sharp cheekbones and tousled auburn hair, standing in the doorway like he'd never left. "Xander," he said, voice breaking. "I'm back." My stomach dropped. The contract was clear. If Julian returned before the year was up, I was out. I watched Xander's face, searching for the man who'd kissed me, who'd laughed with me. But his eyes were locked on Julian, and I saw it. The spark that had been missing with me. I was just the replacement, and the real thing had come home. I slipped upstairs, my hands shaking as I packed. The payout would come, enough to start over, but it felt hollow. I touched my stomach, a secret I'd only just confirmed. I was pregnant. Xander didn't know, and I wouldn't tell him. Not now. Not when his heart was already claimed. By midnight, I was gone, leaving behind a note. "Thank you for everything. Be happy. Elliot." I drove north, the headlights cutting through the coastal fog, San Francisco shrinking in my rearview mirror. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as I headed for a small cabin in Mendocino I'd rented under a fake name. At 27, I was starting over, alone, pregnant, and carrying a heart shattered by a man who'd never truly been mine. The cabin was a weathered refuge, perched above cliffs where waves crashed like my thoughts. I spent days sketching, the pencil a lifeline to sanity. My drawings were no longer of Xander's face but of the life growing inside me. A future I hadn't planned but now clung to. I didn't touch my phone, afraid I'd see his name, afraid I wouldn't. The contract money hit my account, a cold reminder of what I'd been. A placeholder. But the baby, this was mine, not part of any deal. Back in San Francisco, I imagined Xander and Julian rebuilding what I'd never had. Julian's return had been a bombshell, his explanation vague but laced with regret. "I needed to find myself," he'd told Xander in the hallway, his voice carrying to where I stood unseen. "I never stopped loving you." I hadn't waited for Xander's reply. I didn't need to. His silence as he looked at Julian said everything. Weeks passed, and Mendocino became my cocoon. I worked remotely, designing logos for clients who didn't know my story. The locals, a tight-knit crew of artists and fishermen, welcomed me without questions. There was Mara, a 50-year-old cafe owner with a laugh like a foghorn, who slipped me free coffee and asked about my sketches. "You've got a spark, kid," she said one morning, her gray eyes kind. "Don't let it go out." I smiled, but the spark felt dim. I was running from Xander, from the truth, from the ache of loving someone who'd always choose another. Then, one rainy afternoon, a knock came. I opened the door to find Xander standing there, soaked, his blue eyes stormy. "Elliot," he said, voice raw, "why did you leave?" My heart lurched, but I steeled myself. "You got what you wanted," I said, stepping back. "Julian's back. The contract's done." He flinched, rain dripping from his hair. "It's not that simple," he said. "Not anymore." He stepped inside, and the cabin felt smaller, his presence overwhelming. He told me Julian had returned seeking closure, not a second chance. "He's leaving for Paris next week," Xander said, pacing. "He's not the one I want." His eyes met mine, desperate. "It's you, Elliot. It's been you for months." I wanted to believe him, but doubt clawed at me. "I was just the replacement," I said, voice breaking. "You signed a contract for Julian, not me." Xander stopped, his hands reaching for mine. "I signed it for the money," he admitted. But I stayed for you. His fingers were warm, steady, and I hated how much I craved his touch. I was scared, he said. Julian was my past, but you're my future. I pulled away, my secret burning in my throat. I couldn't tell him about the baby, not yet. Not when trust felt so fragile. That night he stayed. We talked until dawn, unraveling months of unspoken truths. He told me about his fear of failing his family's legacy, the pressure that drove him to the contract. I told him about my childhood, the father who'd walked out, the mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep me fed. For the first time, we weren't a mogul and a stand-in. We were just Xander and Elliot, 2 men trying to make sense of love. But Julian wasn't gone yet. A week later, he showed up in Mendocino, his photographer's eye scanning the cabin like it was a set. "I heard you were here," he said, his smile disarming but sharp. "I wanted to see you, Elliot." I braced myself, sensing the undercurrent. Julian wasn't here for pleasantries. He wanted Xander back, and I was the obstacle. Julian stood in the cabin's doorway, his auburn hair catching the dim light, his presence a reminder of everything I wasn't. At 30, he carried an effortless confidence, the kind that made people turn and stare. "Can we talk?" he asked, glancing past me to where Xander sat, tense on the couch. I nodded, stepping outside into the misty Mendocino air, my heart pounding. "Xander told me about you," Julian said, leaning against the porch railing. "He says he loves you." The words hit like a punch, not because they were new, but because Julian's tone carried a challenge. "I know him better than anyone," he continued, his green eyes piercing. "He thinks he's over me, but he's not. You're a rebound, Elliot. A safe choice." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to snap. "You left him," I said, voice steady. "You don't get to decide what he feels now." Julian smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I made a mistake," he said. "I'm here to fix it." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Walk away, Elliot. Let him go. You'll only get hurt." I wanted to scream that I was already hurting, that I was carrying Xander's child, that I loved him more than Julian ever could. But I said nothing. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Back inside, Xander's eyes searched mine. "What did he want?" he asked. I hesitated, then lied. Just to say goodbye. I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. Julian's words had planted a seed of doubt, and it was growing. Was I really what Xander wanted? Or was I just the safe harbor after Julian's storm? Days later, Xander and I drove to a nearby beach, the tension between us palpable. The sand was cold under my feet, the waves a restless roar. "I need to know," I said, stopping to face him. "Do you still love him?" Xander's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I loved who he was," he said finally. "But he's not that person anymore. You are, Elliot. You're real." His hand found mine, and for a moment I believed him. But Julian's words echoed, a poison I couldn't shake. That night, I told Xander about the baby. The words spilled out, raw and unpolished, as we sat by the cabin's fireplace. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's yours." His eyes widened, a mix of shock and something softer. "Hope, maybe." "Elliot," he said, pulling me close. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I swallowed hard. "I didn't want to trap you. Not when Julian was back." He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "You're not trapping me," he said. "You're giving me everything." For a week, it felt like we'd won. We planned, laughed, dreamed of a future with our child. Xander talked about converting a room in his mansion into a nursery, his excitement infectious. But Julian wasn't done. He texted Xander late one night, a message I saw before Xander could hide it. "Meet me in SF. One last time. You owe me that." Xander didn't go, but the fact that he considered it, hesitating for just a second, cut deeper than I'd expected. I confronted him at dawn, the cabin quiet except for the distant waves. "If you're not sure, tell me now," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't do this if you're still torn." Xander's face crumpled. "I'm not torn," he said. "I choose you. I'll always choose you." But doubt lingered, a shadow I couldn't outrun. The Mendocino fog thickened, mirroring the haze in my mind. Xander's promise to choose me felt real, but Julian's shadow clung like damp air. At 27, I was too old to believe in fairy tales. Yet here I was, pregnant and pinning my hopes on a man whose heart might still belong to someone else. I needed clarity, not just for me, but for the life growing inside me. Xander sensed my distance. He tried to bridge it, cooking breakfast, leaving notes on my sketches, planning quiet evenings by the fire. But every gesture felt like an apology for something unspoken. One morning, as we walked the cliffs, he stopped me. "Elliot, talk to me," he said, his voice raw. "I can't lose you." I wanted to spill everything, Julian's words, my fears, the weight of being the replacement. Instead, I said, "I need time." He nodded, but his eyes were haunted. Julian didn't let up. He sent photos to Xander, old ones from their life before me. A Polaroid of them laughing at a vineyard. Another of Julian kissing Xander's cheek under a New Year's Eve sky. Each image was a knife, twisting my insecurities. I found them on Xander's phone one night, left open like a test. "Why do you keep these?" I asked, my voice sharp. Xander looked stricken. "I forgot they were there," he said. "They don't mean anything." But they did. They meant history, a bond one couldn't touch. I decided to confront Julian myself. I drove to San Francisco, my heart a drumbeat, and met him at a quiet cafe in the Mission District. He was already there, sipping espresso, his charm undimmed. "Elliot," he said, leaning back, "I knew you'd come. I didn't waste time." "Leave us alone," I said. "You had your chance." His smile faded, replaced by something colder. "You think you can replace me?" he asked. "Xander's mine. Always will be." I stood, my hands trembling. "He's not a prize to be won," I said. "And I'm not your shadow." Driving back, I felt lighter, but the relief was fleeting. Xander was waiting at the cabin, his face pale. "Julian called," he said. "He told me you met him." I braced for anger, but instead, Xander pulled me into his arms. "You fought for us," he said, his voice thick. "No one's ever done that." For the first time, I felt like more than the replacement. I felt like his choice. We spent the next weeks rebuilding. Xander deleted Julian's photos, blocked his number, and we started planning for the baby in earnest. We picked names, Miles for a boy, Lila for a girl, and talked about moving to a quieter town, maybe Portland. But doubt lingered, a quiet hum beneath our happiness. I wondered if love built on a contract could ever be real, if Xander's heart was truly mine. Then, one night, a storm hit Mendocino. The power went out, and we sat by candlelight, the wind howling outside. Xander took my hand, his eyes steady. "I don't deserve you," he said, "but I'm going to spend every day trying to." He pulled out a ring, not the contract band, but a simple silver one, etched with a wave. "Marry me," he said, "for real this time." Tears stung my eyes. I said yes, but a part of me still feared the past wasn't done with us. The ring felt heavy on my finger, not from its weight but from what it meant. A promise beyond paper, beyond contracts. Xander and I were building something real, but the past has a way of clawing back. At 27, pregnant and tethered to a man I loved but wasn't sure I fully trusted, I stood at a crossroads. Mendocino's cliffs stretched before me, the ocean a reminder that love, like water, could erode even the strongest foundations. Julian's final move came subtly. A letter slipped into Xander's mailbox. No return address, just his elegant scrawl. "You'll always wonder what we could have been." Xander showed it to me, his face tight with resolve. "I'm done with him," he said, tossing the letter into the fire. The flames devoured it, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, a question unanswered. I didn't push, couldn't. Our future depended on trust, not ultimatums. Spring arrived, and with it my third trimester. My sketches filled with dreams of our child, of Xander reading bedtime stories, of a life we'd carve together. We moved to Portland, to a craftsman house with a garden, leaving San Francisco's ghosts behind. Xander took a step back from his company, delegating to spend time with me. He'd rub my feet after long days, his laughter softer now, genuine. "You're my home, Elliot," he said one night, his hand on my swollen belly. I believed him, but belief is a fragile thing. Julian resurfaced one last time, not in person but through a gallery show in Portland. His photos, stark and haunting, filled a downtown space, and Xander's face stared back from one. A candid from years ago, his smile unguarded. I went alone, needing to see it, to face the man who'd shaped so much of my pain. The gallery was crowded, but Julian found me. "You're still here," he said, his voice softer than before. "I underestimated you." I met his gaze. "You underestimated us," I said. "Xander and me." He nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes, and walked away. I never saw him again. Months later, our son, Miles, was born. He had Xander's blue eyes and my stubborn chin, a perfect blend of us. Holding him, I felt the weight of the contract lift, replaced by something deeper, love, messy and real. Xander cried when he held Miles, his fingers tracing our son's tiny hand. "I almost lost this," he whispered. "I almost lost you." I kissed him, my heart full. "You didn't," I said. "We're here." Years later, standing on our Portland porch, Miles giggling as Xander chased him through the garden, I realized something. I wasn't the replacement anymore. I was Elliot Harper, the man who'd walked away from a contract and built a family. Julian was a memory, a lesson in what love isn't. Xander and I, we were the real thing, flawed, human, and fiercely ours. The ocean had taught me that love doesn't just erode. It builds, too, carves new paths, shapes new cliffs. And as I watched my husband and son laugh under the spring sun, I knew we'd built something unbreakable.